Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am Dr. Hind Hassan, Assistant Lecturer of Human Anatomy and Embryology. Inshallah, we will carry on the practical topics of neuroanatomy, and the topic to be started will be the brainstem. We will talk about the external features of the brainstem. Firstly, we should know the brain subdivisions. Brain, as well as the spinal cord, develop from an ectodermal tube called the neural tube. The upper part of the neural tube dilates to be a brain vesicle, while its lower part forms a spinal cord, and the cavity of the neural tube will be the ventricles of the brain and the central canal of the spinal cord. Then the brain vesicle will be divided into three primary vesicles. We will have prosencephalon or forebrain, mesencephalon or midbrain, and also rhombencephalon or the hindbrain. Later on, these vesicles divide to be 5 secondary brain vesicles. Prosencephalon will be telencephalon and diencephalon. Mesencephalon will be the midbrain, while the rhombencephalon will give metencephalon and myelencephalon. What about the adult derivatives of these 5 secondary brain vesicles? Telencephalon will be the cerebral hemispheres, and their cavity will be the lateral ventricle, while the diencephalon will be thalamus and other derivatives of the diencephalon, and the cavity of the diencephalon will be a midline cavity called the third ventricle. Mesencephalon will be the midbrain, and its cavity will be the cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, while metencephalon gives ventrally pons and dorsally the cerebellum, while myelencephalon will be the medulla oblongata, which will be continued downward with the spinal cord, and the cavity of the rhombencephalon or the hindbrain will be the fourth ventricle. Okay, our topic today is the brainstem. What are the parts of the brainstem? Here we take a sagittal section in the brain, divided it equally into right and left halves, and this is the right half of the brain. This is the right cerebral hemisphere, and this is the right cerebellar hemisphere, and this region is the 3 parts of the brainstem. We have midbrain above, then bones, and the lower part of the brainstem will be the medulla oblongata. What about the external features? Firstly, this is the ventral surface of the brainstem. This is the ventral surface of the medulla. This is the ventral surface of bones called basis pontis, and this is the ventral surface of the midbrain, which is called the cerebral peduncles. What about features in the ventral surface of the medulla? We will find elevations separated by fissures. The elevations are arranged from medial to lateral. The most medial elevation will be the pyramid. Pyramid contains corticospinal tract. Its fibers cross to the opposite side, obliterating this median fissure, and this is called the pyramidal decussation. Lateral to pyramid, we have another elevation called olive. It is formed by the inferior olivary nuclear complex. And lateral to olive, we will have what we call it inferior cerebellar peduncle. The peduncle is a method of connection between the brainstem parts and the cerebellum. So we will find each part of the brainstem is connected with the cerebellum by a peduncle. So medulla is connected to the cerebellum by the inferior cerebellar peduncle, while we will find bones connected to the cerebellum through middle cerebellar peduncle, and also midbrain is connected to the cerebellum with the superior cerebellar peduncle. What about fissures separating these elevations? We have in the midline anterior median fissure, which is obliterated in its lower part by the pyramidal decussation. We have between pyramid and olive pre-olivary fissure, and between olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle, we have the post-olivary fissure. What else in the ventral aspect of the medulla? We will see the exit of the last 4 cranial nerves. Hypoglossal nerve is the only one which arises from the pre-olivary fissure, while the glossopharyngeal, vagus, and the cranial accessory nerve arise from the post-olivary fissure. So the ventral aspect of the medulla shows 3 elevations separated by 3 fissures, and we have the exit of the last 4 cranial nerves. What about the ventral aspect of bones, named basis pontis? We will have a groove in the midline it is called the basilar groove because it is related to the basilar artery. Lateral to it, we have transverse pontine fibers which are collected laterally to form the middle cerebellar peduncle. Also, in the ventral aspect of bones, we will see the exit of the middle four cranial nerves. Firstly, the trigeminal or the fifth cranial nerve. It arises midway between upper and lower borders of bones, close to the middle cerebellar peduncle, and this nerve arises by two routes, motor route medially and sensory route laterally. Also, we will see the abducent nerve or the sixth cranial nerve arises between the lower border of bones and the pyramid. What about facial nerve? Facial nerve arises here, and we will know this side. Facial nerve arises also like the trigeminal by two routes. Also, the medial route is the motor one, and the lateral route is called nervus intermedius, and this carry both sensory and parasympathetic fibers. Why it is called nervus intermedius? Because it arises between the motor route of facial nerve and the vestibulocochlear nerve. This area where we see the facial nerve and the vestibulocochlear nerve is called the cerebellopontine angle. This is a space between bones and cerebellum. Also in this space, we will see also the exit of the glossopharyngeal nerve and this reddish structure which will be the choroid plexus of the cavity of the hindbrain. What about the ventral aspect of bones? Firstly, we will have a horizontal section in the, what about the ventral aspect of midbrain? We will take a horizontal section in the midbrain to see this cavity, which is the cerebral aqueduct, dividing the midbrain into dorsal part, tectum, and ventral part called cerebral peduncles. We will see, firstly, a space between the two cerebral peduncles called interpeduncular fossa, and we will find the posterior part of midbrain called tectum, and the anterior part called cerebral peduncle. The cerebral peduncle is divided into three parts. From anteriorly backward, the most anterior part is called crus cerebri. Behind it, we will find substantia nigra, and most posteriorly, we will find midbrain tegmentum. So, when we are looking to the ventral surface of the midbrain, we will find the most anterior part of the cerebral peduncle, which is called the crus cerebri. And also, we will find a space in between the two cerebral peduncle, which is called the interpeduncular fossa, and inside the interpeduncular fossa, we will find the oculomotor nerves. So what about structures present in the interpeduncular fossa? We will find these structures arranged from anteriorly backward as the infundibulum of the pituitary gland and the tuber cinereum, which is considered to be part of the hypothalamus. Behind them, we will find the two mammillary bodies. Behind them, we will find the posterior perforated substance. And don't forget the exit of the two oculomotor nerves medial to the crus cerebri and also in the interpeduncular fossa. This was about the ventral surface of the brainstem. What about the dorsal surface? We will start from blue upward. And also, we will divide the dorsal surface of the medulla into two parts. The dorsal surface of the lower half of the medulla, it is called closed medulla because it encloses the central canal of the spinal cord. And the dorsal surface of the upper half of the medulla, it is named open medulla because it is opened to the cavity of the fourth ventricle or the cavity of the hindbrain. Also, this is the dorsal surface of bones called pontine tegmentum and the dorsal surface of midbrain, which is called tectum. What about features in the closed medulla? We will have also three elevations arranged from medial to lateral as gracile tubercle. It is formed by the gracile nucleus. Lateral to it, we'll find cuneate tubercle. It's formed by cuneate nucleus, and lateral to it we'll find the tuberculum cinereum, which is formed by the spinal trigeminal nucleus. What about features in the open medulla? This is the dorsal half of the dorsal surface of the upper half of the medulla. We will find depression called sulcus limitans. It is inverted V-shaped sulcus. It is called also inferior fovea because we have another sulcus limitans will be named as superior fovea. This inferior fovea separates three areas or three trigones from each other. The first one, which is medial, is called hypoglossal trigone, and it is formed by the motor nucleus of the hypoglossal nerve. In the floor of sulcus limitans, we will find the vagal trigone. It is formed by the dorsal motor nucleus of vagus. And most laterally, we will find the vestibular trigone formed by medial and inferior vestibular nuclei. When you look to the open medulla, you will find this area. This area is called obex, or area postrema, or vomiting center. And the upper part of open medulla is separated from the lower part of the pontine tegmentum by these transversely located fibers. These fibers are called stria medullaris of the fourth ventricle. These fibers contain arcuato-cerebellar fibers, arise from the contralateral arcuate nucleus and pass to the cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncle. What about features in the pontine tegmentum? We will find from medial to lateral, firstly, elevation, called medial eminence. Below it, we will find a rounded swelling called facial colliculus. It is made by the abducent nucleus surrounded by motor fibers of facial nerve. Lateral to it, we will find another sulcus limitans. It is called superior fovea, because this is the inferior fovea. In the upper end of this superior fovea, we will find the locus ceruleus, or the blue spot. This is a norepinephrine secreting site. And most laterally, we will find the vestibular area containing superior and lateral vestibular nuclei, because this vestibular area contains the medial and the inferior vestibular nuclei. The dorsal aspect of bones. What about dictum, or the dorsal aspect of midbrain? We will find 4 elevations, 2 superior colliculi and 2 inferior colliculi. Okay. The superior colliculus will be connected by the superior brachium to the lateral geniculate body. This is a part of the thalamus. While the inferior colliculus will be connected by the inferior brachium here to the medial geniculate body. We can know that the superior colliculus is considered to be visual and auditory reflex centers, while the inferior colliculus is auditory center and auditory reflex center. And don't forget that the trochlear nerve is the nerve that arises from the back of the brainstem. It arises from below the inferior colliculus and it crosses to the opposite side. So the last 10 cranial nerves arises from the brainstem. All arises from the ventral aspect except the trochlear nerve. This nerve is the only one that arises from the dorsal aspect, and also it produces crossing unlike other cranial nerves. Let's see this view. This is the ventral surface of the brainstem. This is the ventral surface of the medulla, showing the pyramid medially. Lateral to it, we will find olive, and most laterally, we will find the inferior cerebellar peduncle. And this is basis pontus, so this will be the basilar groove. These are the transverse pontine fibers, and this is the cerebellopontine angle here. And these are the anterior parts of the cerebral peduncle, which is called crus cerebri. Here is the interpeduncular. Okay. This is the dorsal aspect of the brainstem, so this will be the closed medulla. This will be the open medulla. It is opened to the fourth ventricle. And here the colliculi, superior and inferior colliculi. Let's see another specimen. This is the ventral surface of the brainstem. This will be the 3 elevations in the ventral surface of the medulla, arranged from medial to lateral. The first one, number 1 is for pyramid, number 2 is for olive, and number 3 is for the inferior cerebellar peduncle. This is basis pontus, so this groove will be the basilar groove. These are the transverse pontine fibers, and they are collected to form the middle cerebellar peduncle. This is the crus cerebri, and here the interpeduncular fossa.